Now, Samach Dalet Amud Beis, 10 lines from the top. We learned previously that a person who drank wine should not daven, and we learned that if a person did drink wine, that he should walk. If he walks a derech of a mill, that dissipates the effects of the wine. Is it true that walking a mill dissipates the effects of the wine? The effects of the wine will wear off. We learn in the Bryce, there was a Meister he was riding on a donkey. He was traveling from the town of Akai to Ksiv. And Rabbi Eloi was traveling behind him. They found a loaf of bread on the road. He said to Rabbi Eloi, he said, pick it up. Don't leave it on the road. Pick it up. They encountered a Nachri. Rabbi said to him, Mavgoi. So as we'll see shortly, he called him by his name, Mavgoi. He said, Tul gluskan alao me Eloi. He said, take this bread from Eloi. Nit beloi Rabbi Eloi. So after he gave it to the Nachri of Eloi, approached him and he said, he asked him, where are you from? I'm from the towns of huts. He's from like the small areas of the villages with huts. And what's your name? Magboy. He said, my name is Magboy. So Rabbi Eloi asked him, did he ever meet you? Did he know you? He said no. So Boy says, we saw at this time we see that Rabbi Gamliel was mechaber with Ruach HaKodesh. He never met this Nachri, and he knew his name. He had Ruach HaKodesh. We learned three things at that time. We learned that it's not covered to just pass by bread. Bread is lying on the road. He picked it up. He didn't just leave it there so it should be lying in a state of disgrace. He picked it up. And we see also that determining who the person was or who this item belongs to, we go after the Rav. So therefore, Rabbi Gamliel didn't take the bread and he didn't take it for himself. He assumed that since most of the people were Oivd Kachavim, that you follow the Rav. And therefore it belonged to a Oivd Kachavim, not to a Yid. And therefore he didn't want to eat it. So we'll discuss this a little further in a moment. Then third point is, and we'll come back to this, the third point is, now he determined that, based on the Rav, that the bread belonged to a goy. Well, this incident took place shortly after Pesach. It took place shortly after Pesach. He determined there was a goy. Now the next step is, he picked it up, and he gave it to Mavgoy. So he got a benefit from it. What was the benefit? By giving it to Mavgoy, he got this Tayus Hano, that Mavgoy received this from a Gamliel, and he will be in a certain way indebted to him. So Gamliel did them this favor, so he'll be in a certain way indebted. He got some benefit. Now there's a machlokes in Psachim, if the item belonging to a Nachri on Pesach, if it's Chometz belonging to on Pesach, Chometz over Pesach is awesome. Is it also Ba'achila Ba'asar B'hano? Is it a goy? If it belongs to a Nachri, is it also Ba'achila Ba'asar B'hano? But you see, Al Kolpanim, you see from here that he held that it was Mutter B'hano. He determined that it belonged to a Nachri, and yet he was able to pick it up and give it to Mavgoy, and Nachri. He got benefit from it. So you see that Chometz, Nachri, Shalvar Lava Pesach, is Mutter B'hano. So Taisus explains that he determined, based on the Rav, that it belonged to a Nachri, and therefore he didn't want to eat it. Well, let's say it belonged to a Yisrael. So if it belonged to a Yisrael, well then certainly it's Chometz all over Pesach, it certainly should be Aser. So why, based on the fact that it's a Nachri, that's why he didn't want to eat it. If it would belong to it, we see the mice is talking right after Pesach, or shortly after Pesach. So he determined that it belonged to an Achri. And therefore he didn't want to eat it. Well, what about if it had belonged to a Yid? So Taisus explains, if it belonged to a Yid, we would have assumed a Yid, he's not going to have chametz on Pesach. Must be that it was baked after Pesach. But since it belonged to an Achri, you cannot make that assumption, and therefore he didn't eat it. So he determined that it belonged to an Achri, he didn't eat it, but he held it was mutar ba'ana. B'chor sure, many Achronim asked the kasha, well, we know Midaraisa you go after a Roiv. So what's the shaila over here? So Rabbi Gamliel said, we learned from here with Rabbi Gamliel that you go after the Roiv. The Torah says you go after the Roiv. So the way he explains it, as he says, is that, but in this case, it was a shaila, as we have the Sugi in Baba Basra, do you go after Roiv even in the face of a korov, of something that is close? If you have a choice, there's a majority of people are one way. So for instance, in this case, the majority of the people in the vicinity were Nachrim, but there was a town of Yidden that was close by. Do you attribute this bread to the ownership of most of the people? Most of the people are Nachrim, and therefore you should say that the ownership is a Nachri. Or do you say, no, it probably came from that place which is closest to the korov, the town which is closest, which is a town where the residents are Yidden. So you see from this Maisa, not simply that you go after Roiv, you see from this Maisa that even though if there's a choice between a Roiv and a korov, the Roiv overrides the korov, and you follow the Roiv even in the face of the korov. Continue on with the Maisa, Kem Shegil Ksiv. When we reached the town of Ksiv, a certain person came over to him, and he wanted to be matir his netter. He made a netter, and he wanted to be shoyal. So Rabbi Gamliel asked Rabbi Loi, he said, Klum Shasinu Arvias Yain Haitalki. Do we drink any of this Yain Haitalki? Amar Lahain, he said, yes, we did. So I said, therefore Rabbi Gamliel said, Imkin Yatayal Achareno Ad Sheyafig Yainenu. He said, let this person travel with us until the effects of the wine wear off. He didn't want to be matcha the netter while he had the effect of the yayin. So he didn't want to be matched, paskin, when he had the effect of the wine. So he said, let him travel with us, this person that wants to be shayal and neder, until the effects wear off. So he traveled with him 3 milim, until they reached the place, the rocky heights of Tzur. When they reached that place, Rabbi Gamliel, he came off, he departed from the Chamor, and he wrapped himself in his cloak, and he sat down, and he was matched the neder. So from this Maisa, we learn several things. Number one, we see that this wine, yain italki, intoxicates. And we learn also that a shikar al yuri can't paskin, therefore he didn't want to be mater the neder. And we see that traveling dissipates the effects of the wine. So they traveled, and only then afterwards, then he was willing to be mater the neder. We also learn we learn that you're not made for the neder, not while you're riding, and not while you're walking, and not while you're standing. Because in this Maisa, he made an effort, Rabbi Gamliel, to get off the chamar and to sit down. So he didn't want to do it while he was riding. He didn't want to do it even when he was sitting on the donkey. He didn't want to do it even when he got off and was standing. He dafka sat down. However, we see it was negates our sugis k'tanamia shleishim milim. We see that in order to remove the effects, to dissipate the effects of the wine, it's a derech of 3 milim. Not mil, it's 3 milim. Why was 3 milim needed over here? Because the wine that they drank was yain italki. That's very strong. It has a stronger effect. Here we needed 3 milim. Normally, if it's regular yain, if you drank a regular yain revius, then we would say that 1 mil is sufficient. But over here it was yain italki, you needed more. Frank the Gemara of Amar of Nacham Amar of Avua, Loishan al Shalsa revius. Aval Shalsa Yosem revius, Kol shekain shederach, kol shekain derech tordosa v'shina mishakrata. We say that when we say traveling, walking, it dissipates the effect of the wine. That's only if it's a revius. But if it's more than a revius, we said, the walking and the traveling wears the person down, and the effects of the wine will be felt longer. Now here, if we're saying that he drank yain italki, that's in effect equivalent to more than a revius of regular wine. The alcohol content or the effects of it are more stronger than a revius of regular wine. So therefore, you should say in such a case that traveling should not dissipate the wine. Just like more than a revius of regular wine, we say that derech mitadosai, it wearies him, and he does not become clear and clear thinking. So if it's yain italki, it should have the same effect. And why we say that, where you see in this Maisa that traveling dissipated the koyach of the wine. Maran says, Rochu shiny. When do we say that the derech is metardalsa, that's when he's walking. But when he's riding, he's physically not walking, he's just riding on it, then we don't apply that. And therefore, since in this case he was riding, and therefore it didn't have that effect, and therefore he was able to clear his head, even though he was drinking this yain italki. Hashda da'asis lahachi. Well, now that you are making this chilik between walking and riding, so now that you come to this conclusion, l'Rami bar Abba nami lekasha. This kasha, it's not a kasha, it's Rami bar Abba. Why is that? Rochav shining. Because even though we say that walking a meal dissipates the koyach of the wine, but for riding, you need more than a meal. For riding, you need 3 meal. So the way Miri learns it is, therefore, we don't have to make a chilik between yain italki and regular wine. Based on this, we can say simply that 3 million was required in this case because he was riding. If we would be walking, a meal would be sufficient. But it's riding, you need 3 million. Meaning, at this point, the way he's learning is that in any event, you say that walking a meal will dissipate the koyach of a revius of yain. But a revius of yain will not be dissipated through riding through 1 mil. You need 3 million. Now, if there's more than a revius of yain, then walking a mil will not dissipate the koyach of the wine. If there is more than a revius rather of yain, then riding, we won't say riding is tordasa. But at this point, the way the Mir is learning, you don't have to mechalik between yain italki and regular wine. You can say simply the reason why 3 million is required over here is because he was riding and not walking. So you're saying that in one of the things that we learned out from this Maisa is that when you should be matzah the neder, that you have to be sitting down. And that's why Rabbi Glil got off the donkey and he sat down. Frag the Gemara, Ini, is that so? Amar of Nachman, Mafir Nadorim, Bein Mahalach, Bein Aymen, Bein Rochum. He said that you can be made for the neder, whether you're walking, whether you're standing, or you're riding. The more answers Tanoi. It's a machlokes Tanoim. Now, whether you have to sit down or not, it's really dependent in how much is required to be matzah the neder. Do you need a real psak din, a concentration of it, to have yeshiva das, and then you have to sit? Or if you can easily be matzah it, then you do not require that level of concentration, so you don't have to sit. Now, what the basis of it, and the basis of machlokes is whether paisam b'charot. If the person who made the neder, if he can be matzah the neder, just by saying he regrets making the neder. He wishes he hadn't made the neder. Is that enough? Well, if that's enough, you don't require any great concentration, so you don't have to sit down. So that's the basis of machlokes. Because the ikal mandam paisam parota, there is one mandam who says that's enough to be matzah the neder. Ikal mandam right paisam parota, but there's another Tana that says you can't be paisam parota. It's not enough. So therefore, you require yeshiva. You have to sit down and concentrate to find a valid reason why to be matzah, why this person should be relieved from the neder. You have to find some reason that Had he known the consequences of the neder, he wouldn't have made the neder. So that requires yeshiva. How was he matter the neder? So in what way was he matter? So we'll see from the following that it wasn't simply with charata that the person regretted it. He had to show him what the consequence of the neder was, that it's so severe that he didn't realize, and therefore, had he known that, he wouldn't have made the neder. What did he tell him? He said, he quoted the pasuk, Yesh Baita b'mad kareis cherev. Says sometimes a person, he speaks, and it causes damage like piercing of a sword. But the words of the Chachamim heal. They heal it. They heal what the person did, the damage that the person did. Means anyone who made a neder, it's a terrible thing. He's worthy of being pierced with a spear, with a sword. But the lashon of the Chachamim, who are matter the neder, that heals it. So you see how he's matter it with showing how terrible the consequences of making the neder is. That you see how bad it is. It's like piercing of the sword. The person is deserved to be pierced with a sword. So that's the basis of being matter. It requires more than just the person saying he regrets it. One of the things we learned out from the Ma'aser Gamliel is you don't leave food. You don't just pass by and leave food on the road. That's only when the Bnei Yisrael were not Putzah B'Kshafim. So therefore, if you see bread on the road, then you don't leave it, you pick it up. But in latter generations where Bnei Yisrael Putzah B'Kshafim, then Mavir, you leave it on the road, you don't pick it up. Now, L'chera means that Bnei Yisrael were certainly Putzah B'Kshafim, and therefore, if Bnei Yisrael are Putzah B'Kshafim, certainly you would say that Bnei Yisrael are also Putzah B'Kshafim, that with Kishuv. But al kol panim, we say that which you don't leave the bread on the road, that you pick it up, is only if there's no chashash that somebody would engage in Kishuv, and therefore it would be dangerous to pick it up, because it might be affected by the Kishuv. So when we say you pick it up, where there's no chashash of kishuv. Tana shleimim mavir. If there's whole loaves of bread, then you leave it, because there might have been kishuv over there. Psisim in mavir. But if there's psisim, you don't leave, you pick it up, because the people who do kishuv, they do it only on the whole loaves of bread, not on the pieces. Do they not do kishuv on pieces of bread? The pasuk says, it says, you desecrated the Rebbeinu Shalom, you desecrated me. When you desecrate my name with a nation takes handfuls of barley and pieces of bread. So what was the desecration? Was the chilul that they make kishuv? They do kishuv with pieces of bread. More answers no. Not that doesn't mean with the pieces of bread that they did kishuv on the pieces of bread. It means the shakla bagrayu. They got paid. They were paid with pieces of bread to engage in kishuv. But the kishuv itself is done on whole loaves, not on pieces. Amar Sheshem from Belez ben Azariah. He says, Yochalani lifters kolam in a din. I can be pater. I can pater the Yidden from a punishment, from judgment, from a din. From the time of the Korban until now, I can pater them from a judgment. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Listen to me, this poor, Klal Yisrael, poor nation, who is drunk but not from wine." So, since Klal Yisrael is considered to be a shikar, they're pater from din. Meisel asks you a kasha, shikar mekomeka chamemkar memkar. A shikar, even though he's shikar, what he engages in, he buys and sells, it's valid, it's binding. Over a ve'er sheyesh bo misa, and even if he did a merava which is a misa, misa noisa, he's punished with misa. Malchus If he did an avera where the punishment is malchus, malchus, so he's responsible. We don't say he's not responsible. Kolol shel davar harei kepikach chol davar. We don't consider him irresponsible. We don't consider him not responsible for his actions. He is responsible. El shepater min tefillah. He's only pater from tefillah. So how can you pater him from din? Even a shikar is responsible for his actions. So therefore he should be judged. He answers, what he says, I can pater them, didn't mean from any avera, any judgment, all punishments. He says, what he meant to say is, the Kamar, nami midin tefillah, that from his tefillah, from not concentrating during tefillah, because since we're considered to be shikairim, meaning we don't have the clarity of mind, we're not lucid after the churban, we don't have that clarity of mind. He can pater Klal Yisrael, absolve them from the fact that our tefillahs are not, our davening is not with such concentration, because Rabbi Shem called us shikairim. When we say that the shikar is responsible, he's responsible for his actions. And when he buys and sells, it's binding, etc. That's only if he didn't reach the level of a shikar like light. But light, who is such a shikar, is totally intoxicated, there, kulam is apart from all of them because he's totally and not responsible for his actions. He's not aware of what he's doing, and therefore he is pater because what he does is not binding, and he's not considered responsible for his actions.